Have you walked into a grocery store recently, maybe, your regular spot, and seen something just off?
Yeah, like those aisles looking weirdly empty.
Exactly. Where the produce should be, or maybe the dairy section. It's
Yeah.
unsettling.
Mm. It gives you that weird flashback to like early pandemic days.
Totally. That moment when our, super complex global supply chains just seem to seize up.
And we've mostly gotten used to things being back to normal, so seeing bare shelves again, it brings back a certain anxiety.
It does, but
Yeah.
this time the cause isn't stranded ships or, panic buying. It's invisible. It's a digital threat.
Aimed at a company most people probably haven't heard of, but one that's absolutely essential.
Right. They work behind the scenes getting food from, well, farms and factories to the stores where you actually shop.
And that company is United Natural Foods,
Sure.
or UNFI as most people call it.
UNFI.
Okay. Yeah. And when we talk about the food distribution network in North America, I mean, these guys are giants. They're the largest publicly traded wholesale distributor on the whole continent.
Wow. Largest.
Yeah, the scale is just massive.
Mhm.
Think about it. They serve over 30,000 different locations across the U.S. and Canada.
30,000. That's hard to picture.
It is. And it's not just, the big supermarket chains, though they supply plenty of those. It's also independent retailers, smaller local groceries, natural food stores, even e-commerce sites and food service places like restaurants.
So pretty much everywhere food is sold or served.
Almost. And one really key relationship, the big one, is they are the primary distributor for Amazon's Whole Foods market.
Ah, Whole Foods. Okay, that clicks.
Right. So we're talking about a company with like $31 billion in annual revenue, over 28,000 employees. It's huge.
31 billion.
Yeah. So when a company like that, playing such a critical role, gets hit with a disruption,
Mm.
well, the effects spread out fast and become very, very real.
Absolutely. It connects the dots, doesn't it? From like servers somewhere to the food on your dinner table. Makes you really appreciate the hidden infrastructure.
Definitely.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to understand exactly that. How does a digital attack on one company, even a giant like UNFI, show up as, well, missing groceries on the shelves?
Right.
We need to get into the specifics. What happened? When did it happen? How did UNFI react?
Mhm.
Then we'll trace how that digital problem became a physical reality we could see.
Yeah, the on-the-ground stuff.
Exactly. And we need to put this in context, too. Look at the bigger picture of cyber threats hitting retail and grocery more and more. Why is this happening? Who's behind it?
And what does it tell us about, the weak spots in our super connected economy and these really delicate supply chains?
It's like pulling back the curtain, isn't it?
It really is. It shows just how much our physical world, our access to basic stuff like food, depends on these digital systems being healthy and secure.
And when they're compromised, like we're seeing here.
The consequences aren't just theoretical. They're fast, they're visible, and they hit hard.
And, keeping those critical digital systems safe is it's paramount, especially for businesses that are basically essential infrastructure, like UNFI.
Couldn't agree more.
Which is why this deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. Stonefly is a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. For any business worried about cyber threats, having secure ransomware-proof storage isn't really optional anymore, is it?
No, it's baseline.
And Stonefly specializes in exactly that. They offer solutions like air-gapped and immutable storage. Now, this is tech specifically designed to create safe copies of your data that attackers just plain can't mess with, can't encrypt, can't change, can't delete. It's a crucial safety net.
Absolutely vital for recovery.
So if you want to learn how to protect your critical business infrastructure, you can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. That's sales at stonefly.com. Okay, let's dive into the specifics of this UNFI incident. The main event is this unauthorized intrusion into their systems. Can you walk us through the timeline based on what's public? When did they first spot it and when did they tell everyone?
Okay, yeah. The timeline seems pretty typical for these kinds of things.
Yeah.
There's the initial discovery, then a bit of a scramble internally before they go public.
Right.
So according to UNFI's official statements, the unauthorized activity inside their network was first detected on Thursday, June 5th.
Thursday, June 5th. Okay.
That's the moment their own security, whether it's systems or people, flagged that something was wrong. Something malicious was happening inside their digital house, basically.
So they knew internally on Thursday. How long until the rest of us found out?
Well, the public announcement didn't come until Monday, June 9th.
Okay, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Quite a gap.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard, actually. Companies need that time between spotting it and telling the world. They've got to almost try and figure out how bad it is, what kind of attack it is, contain it if they can, and then they have to prep the official communications.
Makes sense. You don't want to yell fire before you know where it is. How did they make it public on Monday?
They use two main channels. First, an 8K filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. Public companies have to do this for major events that could affect investors.
Right, the legal requirement.
Exactly. And they also put out a press release, just a standard company announcement.
Okay, so Thursday detection, Monday disclosure. That weekend must have been intense inside UNFI.
Oh, absolutely. A flurry of activity, you'd imagine.
What did they actually say they did immediately after finding the intrusion? Like, what's step one when you realize someone's breaking in digitally?
Well, according to their statements, the very first thing they did was activate their incident response plan.
Okay, so they have a plan, like a playbook.
Exactly. It should be, a pre-written set of procedures. Tells you who does what, who to call, the technical steps, the communication steps. All laid out for an emergency like this.
So not just winging it.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
That plan is crucial, and you need it before anything happens. So they activated the plan, and at the same time, they started implementing containment measures.
Containment, like locking things down.
Pretty much the technical equivalent of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to isolate the bad activity so it doesn't spread further through their network or do more damage. And a really key part of that was proactively taking certain systems offline.
Taking systems offline, that sounds like a huge step for a distributor.
That's drastic, yeah.
What kind of systems are we probably talking about here, and why shut them down?
Well, for a company like UNFI, their whole operation runs on this complex web of connected systems. You've got warehouse management systems, the WMS.
Right, telling people where stuff is.
Exactly. Guides, picking and packing.
Right.
Then transportation management systems, TMS, planning truck routes, shipments, order management systems, taking customer orders. And then the big one, often, the enterprise resource planning, or ERP system, handling financials, overall inventory, core business stuff.
Wow, basically everything.
A lot of critical functions.
Hmm?
So if any of those are compromised, or even if they just suspect they might be vulnerable, taking them offline is a defensive move. It stops the attackers from using those systems to spread or encrypt data or cause more chaos. It's like shutting down parts of the digital brain to save the whole thing.
A necessary evil, I guess, but one with immediate knock-on effects.
For sure.
What else did they do besides taking systems down?
Well, they also notified law enforcement. That's standard procedure, especially for potentially big attacks. Law enforcement might have resources, expertise, and they can start investigating who did it.
Right.
And knowing how complex these things are, UNFI also hired external cybersecurity experts. These are specialist firms, digital forensics, incident response, system recovery. They bring in extra brain power and an objective view to figure out exactly what happened and help them rebuild securely.
So, technical lockdown, calling the cops, bringing in the cavalry, covers defense and investigation. But they still had to try and, keep the trucks rolling somehow, right? Did they send to trying to keep operations going?
They did, yeah. They said they were implementing workarounds for certain operations.
Workarounds, like
Yeah.
paper and pencils.
Sometimes, yeah. Or just finding manual processes, alternative, temporary ways to do essential tasks, even if the main computer systems were down. The goal, obviously, was to keep some level of business continuity going, trying to minimize the hit to customers, suppliers, and their own employees.
But even with workarounds, there was obviously an impact. How did UNFI phrase it officially? What did they say in the SEC filing and press release about the consequences?
They used pretty specific language. They said the incident has caused and is expected to continue to cause temporary disruptions to the company's business operations.
Temporary disruptions. Okay, standard corporate speak.
Pretty much. But they got more specific about the core function, saying it temporarily impacted the company's ability to fulfill and distribute customer orders.
Ah, okay, that's the key part, isn't it? Their main job.
Exactly. And while they stressed, their priority was customers, suppliers, associates, that official language confirms it. The digital breach directly stopped them, or at least slowed them way down, from doing the physical work of getting products out the door.
Temporary disruptions and temporarily impacted. Even if it's careful wording, the message is clear. They couldn't do their job properly.
Right.
And this is where we shift, isn't it? From the company statements and the tech talk about offline systems to what people were actually seeing, the physical reality. How exactly does shutting down a warehouse system translate to empty shelves at my local Whole Foods?
It's a really stark example of how tied together that digital and physical are in modern logistics. Just picture UNFI's setup.
Yeah.
Huge warehouses, hundreds of thousands of different products every single day. Orders pour in from those 30,000 stores. The warehouse management system, the WMS, is what tells the staff exactly where to find every single item for a specific store's order, how many to grab, the most efficient path to take through the warehouse. Without that system, the staff basically lose their map and their instructions.
So the people are there, the food's there, but the information to connect them is just gone.
Pretty much. They might have paper backups for emergencies, but for an operation this huge, manually figuring out where everything is and building thousands of accurate orders, it becomes incredibly slow, almost impossible for most of the inventory.
Like trying to assemble a giant puzzle with no picture on the box.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And it's similar with the transportation management system, the TMS.
Yep.
That plans which truck goes where, the best route, what specific pallets go on which truck for which store. If the TMS is down, you don't know which truck gets which order, you don't have loading lists, you don't have efficient routes. Sometimes you literally can't even send a truck out legally without the right digital paperwork.
So the trucks are waiting, driver's ready, but nothing.
The whole process just breaks down. Grouping orders, loading correctly, sending them to the right place efficiently, it all falls apart.
It sounds like trying to run a complex dance routine with the music suddenly cut off. And this brings us to those personal stories, the anecdotes people shared online, which really show the human side of this digital failure. What were people saying on social media?
Exactly. The corporate statements are one thing, but the real feel comes from people experiencing it. Almost right away, actually, even before the official announcement on Monday, stuff started popping up online, X, Reddit.
What were they seeing?
People were posting pictures from their local stores, especially Whole Foods, because of that primary distributor link. They were describing aisles as starkly empty, a sight we really hoped we were done with.
Yeah, definitely.
And there were photos of sign stores put up, apologizing for stuff being out of stock, citing temporary supply issues.
So signs are basically the physical proof of the digital problem, right?
Absolutely. But we also heard from people working inside this system, or with it. What did they share? Their perspective is fascinating.
Yeah, their comments are incredibly revealing, gives you the inside view. We saw posts from people identifying as working with UNFI distribution or in the affected stores. Like one Whole Foods buyer just posted online, struggling lol.
Struggling. Just that one word from a buyer.
Says it all, doesn't it?
Oh.
Their entire job is getting stock on the shelves, and they just couldn't. It shows the direct bottleneck UNFI's problems created.
They're on the front line trying to get stuff for us, and their tools are broken.
Right. And then there was someone who called themselves an order writer, probably someone who deals directly with UNFI's ordering systems. They talked about how the last couple of days felt sloth-like because they just couldn't do their job properly.
Sloth-like. Ouch.
And they quoted someone else saying it captured the feeling perfectly. With this system down, I am as useless as an ashtray on a motorcycle. And the original poster added, felt that.
Wow. Useless as an ashtray on a motorcycle. That is vivid, isn't it? It just perfectly captures that feeling of helplessness when the technology you depend on disappears. These are skilled people, they know their jobs, but suddenly they can't function because the digital layer is gone.
That quote's going to stick with me. It's not just the people placing orders either, is it? It hit the people actually moving the goods, too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We heard from a third-party truck driver. These are often independent folks who work for trucking companies that UNFI hires.
Right.
This driver picked up a load late on a Friday night, noticed a note saying some trips were off limits due to UNFI system issues. Their load was okay that night, but the real hit came Saturday morning.
What happened Saturday?
Their employer got told UNFI wouldn't be dispatching any loads that day. The system was down, they couldn't load trucks properly, couldn't generate the manifests, nothing. So this driver just lost a full day's work. No income for Saturday because a computer system failed somewhere else.
Just like that. Lost income.
Just like that. And they mentioned hearing rumors online on Reddit that the system might be down for the whole next week, which obviously raises huge concerns about more lost work.
This is where it gets incredibly real, isn't it? An abstract cyberattack means a truck driver doesn't get paid, a buyer is stressed out, an order writer feels useless.
Exactly. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's people's livelihoods, it's stress, it's inconvenience.
These stories are so important because they show how a breach in some server room doesn't just stay there.
No, it cascades out. It has a direct physical impact on the economy,
Yeah.
on individuals. It just highlights how deeply interconnected everything is now. The digital information flow is tied directly to the physical flow of goods. Break one, and you immediately affect the other, right down to what's available for you to buy at the store.
It really makes you pause and think about all those hidden digital layers keeping daily life running and maybe how fragile they are.
Precisely. We totally take it for granted until it breaks.
Now, this UNFI attack, while it's big news now, it's important to stress this isn't some random isolated thing, right? It feels like part of a bigger pattern.
Oh, absolutely. You really can't look at UNFI in a vacuum. It's just the latest, significant tremor in this ongoing digital earthquake that's been shaking up businesses, especially retail and grocery, for a few years now.
A digital earthquake. I like that. So what are some other big examples we've seen recently?
Well, the list is getting disturbingly long. Back in March, Sam's Club, owned by Walmart, obviously they said they were investigating claims about a breach linked to the Clop ransomware group.
Okay, Sam's Club.
Going back a bit further, maybe the most impactful one recently was JBS Foods in 2021. They're the world's biggest meat producer. They got hit by the REvil ransomware group.
I remember JBS. That was huge, wasn't it?
Massive. It forced them to shut down production plants globally. They ended up paying an $11 million ransom to get back online. $11 million.
Wow. And it's not just a North American problem, right? You mentioned shaking on both sides of the Atlantic.
Correct. We've seen a spate of attacks hitting major UK retailers recently. We're talking big names. Harrods, the Co-op grocery chain, Marks & Spencer.
Cutherin's even. Wow.
Yeah. And those attacks have been linked to some pretty sophisticated groups, like Scattered Spider and affiliates using something called Dragon Force ransomware. It shows this targeting of retail and supply chains is definitely global.
And didn't we hear warnings about this coming to the U.S.?
We did. What's really concerning is shortly after those UK attacks surfaced, Google's threat analysis team actually put out a specific warning. They said these same actors had pivoted and were now targeting U.S. retailers.
So there was an explicit heads up.
A very clear signal that companies like UNFI were probably in the crosshairs. And it's not just food either. We saw Victoria's Secret had to shut down its website temporarily due to a threat. Adidas got hit by a third-party breach affecting customer data. It's across the retail spectrum.
Okay, so there's a definite pattern. High-profile victims, clear warnings. Why? Why is retail and grocery, especially the distribution part, such a hot target? What's the motive? What are the weaknesses?
Well, the main motive, especially with ransomware, which is behind a lot of this, is usually simple.
Right.
Money. Big money.
Right. The ransom demands.
Exactly. Attackers cripple a company's operations and then demand a huge payout to fix it. And for a business like a food distributor, that pressure is dialed way up.
Because of the perishable goods.
Exactly. Every hour they're down isn't just lost sales. It's potentially food spoiling in warehouses or trucks.
Yep.
That escalates the financial loss incredibly quickly and puts immense pressure on them to pay up just to get things moving again.
So, high potential reward for the attackers, amplified by the ticking clock of spoilage. What about the vulnerabilities? Why is retail so open to attack?
It's just fundamentally digital now. Think about it from inventory coming into a warehouse, to tracking it, to selling it at a register or online, to shipping it. It's all managed by computers. This creates what security folks call a massive attack surface. Basically, tons and tons of potential entry points for bad guys. Websites, payment systems, internal networks, employee email, the software managing the supply chain, cloud services.
So lots of doors to try and pick the lock on.
Exactly. And crucially, especially in distribution, you often have older, complex systems managing the logistics. Chris Hawk from Pixel Privacy had a great quote, calling outdated IT systems in distribution networks a potential ticking time bomb.
A ticking time bomb.
Why? Well, these can be legacy systems put in place years, maybe decades ago. They probably weren't designed with today's cyber threats in mind. They might be running on old software that doesn't get security updates anymore, making them easy targets for known hacks. They're often complex, tangled together, making them really hard to secure completely. Attackers actively look for these weak spots.
So a huge digital footprint combined with potentially old, creaky systems, prime target.
Definitely.
And the attackers themselves, who are they? Is it like one big group, or is it more complicated?
That's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Identifying who's actually doing it is incredibly difficult. Experts like Keith Wojcicek from Kroll have pointed out that the whole landscape of attackers has become increasingly interchangeable and decentralized without a clear organizational structure.
Decentralized. What does that mean, and why does it make defense harder?
Well, it's not like the old days, a hacker group with a name and a logo. Now you've got things like ransomware as a service. Developers create the malicious software, then basically rent it out or sell it to affiliates who actually carry out the attacks.
So anyone can rent the tools?
Pretty much, if they have the inclination and some technical skill. These affiliates could be anywhere in the world, constantly changing their tactics, their digital fingerprints. Trying to trace an attack back becomes incredibly hard. It might start in one country, bounce through servers in others, use tools made somewhere else, carried out by someone with no public profile. It's not like fighting a traditional army with a known base.
It sounds slippery.
Very. It's often described as a shadowy, asymmetric conflict waged in the virtual realm. The attackers have anonymity on their side. They can probe for weaknesses 2 to 47, and they only need to succeed once. The defenders. They have to be perfect everywhere, all the time, protecting this huge, changing digital landscape against ghosts.
That makes a ton of sense. It's like trying to swat flies in the dark, which means companies can't just focus on stopping every attack.
Exactly. Perfect prevention is getting close to impossible. The focus has to shift towards resilience, being able to take a punch and keep operating, or at least get back up very, very quickly.
And a punch like this, even if temporary, must hit the company's finances hard, right? How did the stock market react when the UNFI news broke?
Oh, the reaction was fast and sharp. As soon as UNFI made the disclosure on Monday morning, their stock price just dropped, plunged 6%.
6%? That sounds like a lot for a big company.
It is. For a company with billions in market value, 6% is millions, tens of millions of dollars in shareholder value, just wiped out almost instantly. It's a very clear sign. Investors are spooked about the financial fallout.
So investors are basically saying, cyber risk is real, and we're pricing it in.
Absolutely. This is exactly where you see that idea of a cyber risk discount kicking in. The market is starting to value companies lower if they seem vulnerable or haven't shown they can handle these attacks well.
Yeah.
How technically resilient a company is or isn't is becoming a real factor in valuation, right alongside things like revenue and profit. It's not just an IT issue anymore.
No, it's a fundamental business risk.
Totally.
So how are the analysts trying to put a number on this? How much could this disruption actually cost UNFI? It's not just a one-off fine, it's lost business, right?
Exactly. They're trying to model it based on lost sales and lower profits, depending on how long the systems are down.
Yeah.
Some analysis came out pretty quickly after the attack surfaced. For instance, they estimated that even a relatively short outage, say just 3 days, could potentially cost UNFI around $290 million in lost sales.
Ugh. 3 days, almost $300 million.
Yeah, it just shows the sheer volume they move every single day. And that lost revenue could translate to roughly a $41 million hit to their gross margin, their profit on those sales.
$41 million in profit gone in 3 days. That's painful. What if it lasted longer?
Well, the projections get much uglier then. Analysts looked at scenarios like, say, a 20-day outage. If something like that happened, the impact could be severe enough to really damage their results for the entire fiscal year.
How badly?
Estimates suggested it could potentially slash UNFI's earnings per share EPS, a key metric for investors for fiscal year 2025, by over $3.
$3 off the EPS? That's huge.
It's significant, yeah. Analysts called that level of impact a potential structural blow to profitability, meaning it's not just a temporary dip. It could affect the company's fundamental ability to earn money going forward. And, when you compare UNFI's valuation, they use metrics like EBITDA to compare similar companies.
Right, like comparing apples to apples.
Kind of. UNFI already traded at a bit of a discount to competitors like Cisco or US Foods, maybe because of its business mix or other concerns. Its EBITDA was around 4.7 times. Analysts were saying that the extra discount the market slapped on them after the attack is really only justified if UNFI gets things fixed fast, like back to normal within 10 business days. Any longer than that, and the stock likely stays depressed and earnings estimates keep falling.
Okay, so huge pressure to fix it quickly. Now, their quarterly earnings call was scheduled for June 10th, right around the time this all broke. What were investors and analysts desperate to hear from the company on that call? What key questions needed answers?
Yeah, that timing was intense.
Yeah.
They were looking for specifics, for concrete data, and clarity on the big unknowns. First and foremost, a number. They needed a quantitative assessment from UNFI itself. How much revenue have we actually lost so far? And critically, what's the real timeline for getting fully back to normal? Temporary isn't good enough. They want dates, recovery percentages.
Okay, hard numbers and a timeline. What else?
Second, the money shield. Do they have cyber insurance? If yes, how much does it cover? That tells investors how much of the financial hit might be offset.
Right, insurance limits. Makes sense.
Third, Details about the attack itself. Was it ransomware? Was there a demand? Did they pay? And the really big one, did the attacker steal data? Data exfiltration is a huge worry because of potential lawsuits, fines, reputational damage.
Yeah, data breaches are a nightmare.
Absolutely. And finally, given that huge Whole Foods relationship, investors wanted to know what Amazon and Whole Foods were doing. Were they activating backup suppliers? How were they coping? Understanding how UNFI's biggest customer is reacting is vital for judging the potential long-term damage to that relationship.
It really sounds like this one incident isn't just a blip. It could actually force some longer-term strategic changes at UNFI, maybe even in the industry.
It absolutely could. An event like this can be a catalyst for big shifts. For example, you have to think Amazon, known for optimizing everything, might use this as leverage when they renegotiate their contract with UNFI.
How so?
They could push really hard for dual sourcing clauses, meaning they'd set up contracts with another major distributor alongside UNFI, instead of relying so heavily on just one for Whole Foods. That reduces Amazon's risk if one supplier has issues, but it could really water down UNFI's special primary distributor status, which has been a huge part of their business.
Ooh, okay. Losing exclusivity would hurt.
That's all right. And then there's the unavoidable need to spend more on tech. Before this, UNFI was apparently budgeting around $40 million a year for IT. Now, analysts are projecting they might need to spend over $150 million extra over just the next 2 years.
Whoa, $150 million more on top of the $40 million.
That's the projection. To seriously upgrade systems, harden security, build more resilience. This kind of unplanned, massive spending puts a squeeze on their free cash flow, the money left over after running the business and investing. And that, in turn, could potentially threaten their ability to keep paying dividends to shareholders.
So the ripples just keep spreading. Lost sales now, potentially lost exclusivity later, huge unexpected costs. How are the pros, the professional investors, trying to play this? Are there specific strategies they use in these situations?
Yeah, sophisticated investors have a few tools in the toolbox for this kind of volatility. One common one is a pairs trade.
Pairs trade.
Yeah, like betting on two related stocks moving in opposite directions. In this case, maybe going long on a competitor like Cisco, betting its stock will go up while simultaneously going short on UNFI, betting its stock will go down further.
Why do that?
The thinking is Cisco might temporarily pick up some of UNFI's lost business, boosting its stock, while UNFI struggles. By doing both, they hope to profit from the difference in how the two stocks perform, regardless of what the overall market does.
Interesting. Hedging their bets, kind of. What else?
Well, they might look at the cybersecurity sector itself. An incident like this scares other companies into spending more on security. So firms that provide those solutions, maybe like our sponsor Stonefly, offering backup and recovery, could see more business. Investors might buy stock in leading cybersecurity companies, maybe even alongside a bet against UNFI.
Okay, betting on the fixers.
Right. And then there are always contrarians looking for the bottom. If UNFI's stock falls far enough, some might think the bad news is fully priced in and see it as a cheap buying opportunity. But that's a really risky game, trying to catch a falling knife.
For sure. And what specific signals are these pros watching? They can't just be reading the news, right? They must be digging for real data.
Oh, absolutely. They're looking at granular stuff, trying to get ahead of the curve. A huge one is order fill rates. What percentage of orders is UNFI actually managing to fulfill each day? They want to see that get back above 95% and fast. Some analysis was even targeting a specific date, like June 14th, for seeing that normalization.
Okay, fill rates. What else?
They're using tools to monitor the dark web. Seeing if any stolen UNFI data pops up for sale there, that would confirm data exfiltration and signal bigger future problems.
Right, the stolen data piece.
They're also looking at truckload data, if they can get it from third-party sources or industry contacts. Are trucks actually leaving UNFI warehouses at what volume? That's a real-time indicator of operational recovery. Or it could show if customers are starting to bail and use other distributors.
Real-time logistics data. Clever.
And of course, they'll watch insider transactions. Once the dust settles and executives are allowed to trade again, will they be buying stock, showing confidence, or selling? That could be a powerful signal about what management really thinks.
Wow. It's a whole other level of analysis, isn't it? Tracking fill rates and dark web chatter.
It really shows how deeply these cyber events are now plugged into detailed financial modeling and trading strategies. It's not just a news headline for these guys.
This whole mess, from the attack to the empty shelves to the stock drop, it really drives home a point, doesn't it? Just having a plan for after you get hit isn't really enough anymore.
Precisely. The expert consensus, based on the analysis we're seeing, is that companies like UNFI need to think beyond just incident response. Having an incident response plan is absolutely critical, don't get me wrong. That's your playbook for after the breach happens, how to contain it, how to recover.
Right, the emergency plan.
But the real focus needs to shift towards cyber resilience.
Okay, response versus resilience. Let's unpack that difference. What does resilience really mean here?
Okay, think of incident response like the paramedics arriving after a car crash. They treat the injuries, stabilize things, it's reactive. Cyber resilience is more like building the car with crumple zones, airbags, strong materials, maybe even self-driving features that avoid the crash in the first place or minimize the damage if it happens.
Okay. Building it stronger from the start.
Exactly. It's about designing your systems, your processes, your whole organization so that if an attack does get through, the impact is minimized. Your core operations don't just grind to a halt, or they can be brought back online incredibly quickly. It's about designing systems that can absorb a shock, that can bend without breaking completely.
So minimizing the actual downtime and the chaos it causes, not just cleaning up the mess afterwards.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And for a food distributor, that resilience is even more critical because of what they sell.
Yeah, the spoilage factor again.
Absolutely. That's what makes the UNFI situation so intense. They're dealing with perishable goods, food, dairy, produce. Downtime isn't just inconvenient. It's a literal race against the clock. Every hour the system is down, food is potentially spoiling. That's lost revenue you can never get back, actual food waste, and huge damage to your reputation with customers. It adds this unique urgent pressure compared to, say, a software company where the main asset is data that doesn't rot.
So this isn't just UNFI's bad luck. It's really a wake-up call for the whole industry, isn't it?
It really should be. It throws a harsh spotlight on the structural weak points in these complex distribution networks. Maybe people didn't fully grasp how a digital attack on one piece could ripple out so fast and hit the physical flow of goods so hard. It strongly suggests retailers, restaurants, everyone relying on these distributors needs to seriously rethink how they manage vendor risk.
Meaning
That old model of relying heavily on just one super efficient, just-in-time supplier, while it saves money, might just be too brittle for today's threat landscape. This incident could and probably should push the industry towards building more redundancy, more backup options, more resilience into those supply chain partnerships.
And it brings us right back to where we started, those empty shelves. It just hammers home how totally linked the digital and physical worlds are now.
They're not separate anymore, are they? They're completely intertwined. Those invisible networks, the data flowing through UNFI systems, that's the lifeblood keeping the physical economy moving.
Yeah.
And when that lifeblood gets infected by a cyber attack, the impact isn't just on screens. It stops trucks, it empties shelves, it affects people's jobs. This whole thing is just a stark reminder. Mess with the virtual world, and you immediately affect the pulse of daily life, right down to the food in your local store.
Which brings us to the final point. What does all this mean for you, listening right now? Why should you care about some cyber attack on a wholesale distributor you'd maybe never heard of?
Because it's not some abstract corporate issue happening far away. UNFI's problems directly hit the availability of products in thousands of stores, including places many of us shop regularly, like Whole Foods. You might have actually seen the empty shelves yourself without even knowing why. And if major players in the supply chain face prolonged disruptions, yeah, it could eventually affect the cost and the variety of food available to you down the road.
So it's a straight line from a hacker somewhere to your grocery list.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how these incredibly efficient just-in-time supply chains we've built, well, they can also be fragile. They're optimized to minimize waste and storage, which is great for keeping costs down for us. But that lean efficiency sometimes comes at the cost of robustness, of resilience. When a shock hits, especially a sophisticated digital attack designed to cripple things, that same optimization can become a vulnerability, leading to really fast, widespread problems.
And that points to a need for vigilance, right? Not just from companies, but maybe from all of us.
Yeah, I think so. For businesses, it's obviously a huge wake-up call. Invest seriously in defenses, build resilience, practice those response plans like crazy. For us as consumers, maybe it's just about understanding that the amazing convenience we take for granted, that seamless flow of goods, relies on this hidden, complex digital plumbing. and that plumbing has weak points we all need to be aware of.
Okay, let's try and boil this down. Key takeaways from this deep dive. We saw a huge food distributor, UNFI, get hit by a cyber attack.
Yep, forced critical systems offline, major operational disruption.
That digital problem showed up physically empty shelves at places like Whole Foods, real impacts on people's jobs, like truck drivers losing work.
Underscored the vulnerabilities in the whole food supply chain.
And it hit the finances immediately. Stock plunged, raising big questions about the cost of downtime and forcing a rethink about digital resilience being more than just basic security.
Yeah, it's a powerful unfolding case study. Shows how digital threats create very physical problems, hitting something as basic as our food supply, and really challenging how we think about our interconnected economy.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, the thing to chew on after this is over. We've just seen how an attack on one company, even a big one like UNFI, can mess with the food supply for thousands of stores, affecting millions of people.
Yeah, the ripple effect is huge.
So if that's possible,
Yeah.
what other essential systems that we rely on every single day, think about water, power, healthcare, transportation networks, might be just as vulnerable to digital attacks in ways we maybe haven't even fully grasped or prepared for yet?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the billion-dollar question. The same interconnectedness that gives us all this efficiency also concentrates risk. It creates the potential for these cascading failures when digital systems are targeted.
A really sobering thought to leave you with, thinking about the digital foundations of, well, everything. And as businesses grapple with these exact vulnerabilities, trying to strengthen their defenses, just remember how vital secure data storage and recovery really is. This deep dive was brought to you by Stonefly.
Leaders in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, AI storage, cloud solutions, the whole package.
Exactly. For any business facing threats like ransomware, having that secure ransomware-proof storage is just essential defense. Stonefly offers solutions like air-gapped and immutable storage specifically designed so that even if your main systems get hit, you have clean, safe copies of your critical data ready for a fast recovery.
Which, as we've seen, can make all the difference.
Absolutely. To learn more about how Stonefly can help protect your business infrastructure, contact sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo. That's sales@stonefly.com.